no matter what, once finalization happens, then you're done. You may not apply for grants after finalization. Some people get placement and finalization confused.
Yeah.
So placement is very different than finalizing that adoption. And
Right.
some folks say, oh, well, I can wait until I get, wait until the child is home placed, and then I can start looking at grants. And no, we don't want you to do that. We want you to start talking and looking soon. Okay.
Yeah. And
So
a great
it's that
time
fun.
is after your home study and after you've signed up with your agencies.
Right. And then you're kind of you kind of understand.
That
You've had
waiting.
enough of a
Right.
window to really understand. You've written your story. You kind of know what your timeline is. You kind of really understand what your expenses are. And at that point, you can start. And that's also another time to do fundraising because
Yeah.
now you've got a sense of urgency, right? Now, oh, this is exciting. And now you can begin to announce it and build a campaign around that.
Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast, your go-to guide through the beautiful, complex, and transformative journey of adoption. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through adoption consultant for over a decade, author of the Adoption Roadmap book, and your trusted guide. In each episode, we dive into real experiences, expert insights, and the raw, honest truths that you will need to navigate your journey. Whether you're just beginning, in the thick of it, or well past placement, you'll find support and community here to help you navigate this unique path with confidence and love. Adoption isn't all rainbows and butterflies. It is life-changing and worth every bit of effort. Let's learn, grow, and journey together on the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Hi, I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, founder and CEO of RG Adoption Consulting. I'm excited today to be welcoming my friend, Kelly Ellison of Your Adoption Finance Coach, to talk all about finances in adoption, which is one of the number one hurdles that people have when it comes to thinking about whether or not they can adopt a baby due to the astronomical costs involved in adoption and the risks as well. So tonight we're going to hear from Kelly Ellison to talk all about grants, loans, fundraising, and all that fun stuff. So tune in if money is a question that you have in your mind when it comes to adoption. I founded RG Adoption Consulting in 2013, shortly after adopting my son, using the help of an adoption consultant. And the one thing that I left very clear about after I adopted was that nobody should go through this process alone. You need support. You need a good team around you. You need somebody to guide you and be on your side. Somebody who's gone through it before, who knows the intricacies, who has a wide network, who have the resources for you. And that's what an adoption consultant can do for you. But it goes beyond just that emotional support and guiding you through the twists and the turns of adoption. It's also the money. What does all this money go toward? What happens if I fall short? What happens if I lose money? Can I recover? Those are big questions that a consultant can't always help you with. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly now, and she's going to talk all about financing and adoption.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. I appreciate having the opportunity to be with everyone tonight and talk with you about really my favorite topic, which is financing your adoption. And a very similar story. Myself, I am an adoptive parent also. Brought our daughter home in 2008 from China. We did an intercountry adoption. We waited a very long time. We spent a lot of money. And at the end of that journey, it was very clear to me that this was a major pain point for many folks that are wanting to do adoption. I had experience as a speaker and trainer and in nonprofit management. and worked with a lot of different nonprofits from the arts to the environment, and had a real lens on life for how to write grants and how to do fundraising, and also have a master's degree in business. So I decided to combine all those skills and come up with your adoption finance coach. And we have now been working for the last 17 years, working with families, over 17,000 families we've worked with, and reported raising, these are some new numbers, reported raising $18 million. So proud of those numbers, so proud of our team. And the way that we do this is we come alongside you. So we come alongside you with your consultant or agency. We work with Rebecca's clients to help them to understand how to put together all of the components of the finances of the adoption. And so tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to jump right in and really just talk about each one of these levels. So cash, loans, grants, fundraising, and social media. And all of these have a part to play. The truth is that there's no silver bullet. And, just because you may have money, you might have $60,000, you just might have that, but you don't really want to spend it all on your adoption. So what we're going to do is kind of break it down in a formula with you and help you to understand how you put all of these pieces together. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off so I can concentrate on my slides. It's kind of distracting. So I can concentrate on my slides and really drill down and talk with you about these various different components. So this is not intended to be an upside down peace sign. It just is the formula for what we call a third formula, a third rule, really. And hopefully it kind of helps you to really understand where do all of the components come from. Now, this is a template, it's a formula, so you have to really see if it, how it applies to you. But let me talk you through it. So the first third is going to be your own money. Okay, that's going to be the first third. The second third of it is going to be loans and family gifts. And then that last section is going to be grants and fundraising. And hopefully that helps you to really get a pretty realistic idea. So if we're talking about $60,000, you can see how we're going to split that up into thirds. That's pretty common. You need to know that when you start your adoption journey, you're going to have to put your own money into this. There are a lot of folks that come in and say, no, I'm not going to do any loans. There's a lot of folks that come in and say, no, I'm not going to fundraise. Our job is not to tell you what to do. Our job is to give you the resources and understand the consequences, or really understand how those resources work. And then you can make an educated decision for how you're going to put that together. So if you're no matter where you are on your adoption path, we recommend that you start this at the very beginning. It can really ease your anxiety and your stress. But no matter where you are on the path, it's always a good idea to step back and take a look at what the finances look like. And I can tell you from my own experience, we don't like to think about money and kids. We just don't like to put those two things together. We like to think, oh, okay, it's going to get all, Pollyanna, it's going to all be taken care of. It's, it's all going to work out. And yeah, it all does eventually work out. But there are so many plates that are spinning. And the good work that RG Adoption is doing with helping you with this process, helping you to understand the various different steps and how to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, what is necessary for you. Understand that that's also equally important on the financial path. And so really helping you to understand that and lowering your stress and your anxiety about the journey ahead. So when we first talk about cash, that's that first third of that pie. Really, we encourage you to look at your own budget. This is where you're going to get an understanding for, well, how much money can I set aside for my adoption? What is, how it really starts with you. And I can tell you that if you're sitting there thinking about, well, we're going to be able to qualify for grants or any of the loans or any of those kinds of things, any foundation that you talk to is going to want to know what you have contributed for your adoption. So it's really important to look at your money now and make a decision about how much will you contribute. Set up a separate account for your adoption. I can't tell you how many times I talk with folks and we'll ask them, what do you have in your savings account? And they'll give us a number. And that number represents their emergency savings. It represents, sometimes they pay bills out of that, all of that. And oh yeah, that also represents the money for our adoption. It's really not recommended that you do that. You really need to make a decision about the money that you have and set aside that money from your emergency savings account. Don't we all know after living through COVID, what it means to have an emergency savings account, right? So setting up a separate account for your adoption and deciding what amount you're going to set aside each month, make it sacred. Nothing else happens with that money. So think about that. You don't want to make it too high. You don't want to make it too low. You need to be very comfortable with that. No judgment. It doesn't matter what it is. It's more of the commitment and your integrity in that. So reviewing your personal budget, finding out how much can you set aside, make it realistic, creating a timeline of your expenses to make sure that you're on track. You're going to create a budget for this. We will help you create a budget for this. We have various different templates and timelines that you can work with. But if you're working with us or you're doing this on your own, create a budget for your adoption. And you have to look at the revenue and the expenses. You have to look at both of those and when those expenses occur. So the other part of this is going to be gifts from friends and family. And one of the things that's very important to understand is that people are going to want to help you. They're going to want to help you. And whether you don't feel comfortable about that, you might not want to go out and ask people, as human beings, we really don't like to ask for help, do we? Hat in hand, we don't like to ask for, if we need something. But, if you really kind of switch the scenario and think about perhaps your friend, your best friend or a family member that is doing an adoption and how you really want to help them. So be sure that you accept and be prepared and prepare yourself for accepting money from family and friends. That could be a GoFundMe account. It could be an adopttogether.org account. It could just be, an account where you accept cash. There's a couple of things that are kind of interesting in this. So receiving cash, a lot of people don't realize that individuals can receive up to, I believe the number is 17,000 now, but up to $17,000 in cash gifts without claiming it on your taxes. Now, I want to say that again, $17,000 per person, accepting cash gifts without claiming it on your taxes. This has nothing to do with adoption. This is a gift tax rule. You can find it on the irs.gov, and you'll also find the amount. I was told a couple weeks ago in a webinar that I did, somebody typed in the chat the exact amount, and I can't remember what it was, but it is the gift tax rule. And so you can receive that money, and then you can take that money and use it for your qualified adoption expenses. And now, are you ready? You can take that and put it toward your adoption tax credit as a qualified expense. So don't say no too fast when we talk about receiving money from gifts and friends. And I think the best advice that I can give you here is to let them be a part of this amazing community, amazing family that you're building, because they really do want to be a part of it. So shifting gears, we're going to talk about loans and kind of the different types of loans that are available. What you're looking at here are really just basically some traditional loans. You're going to have the option of a personal secured or unsecured loan. The difference between those two things, an unsecured loan might mean that you've got an amazing, fabulous credit rating. And it also means that you have a relationship with a banker. That's also sometimes pretty important. I remember as a child, my father used to take me to the bank with him, and he would talk to the banker. He always thought that was so cool to stand in the middle of the bank and talk to the banker about, just what was going on, or business deals or something like that. And he would always walk me out of the bank, and he would just say, Kellyanne, it's very important to have a relationship with your banker. Those days are gone, aren't they? I mean, it's very unusual to have a local bank. If you have a local bank, yay. But, now our banks are online. Our banks are these national conglomerates. So, but it is still possible to have a personal secured loan or an unsecured loan. And sometimes most of the time, those are based on collateral or not. Employer retirement funds. So we put this in this category because you can borrow from your 401k or your 403b if your employer allows that. Okay. Sometimes they'll say only for emergencies. Sometimes they won't have any criteria. They won't have any criteria at all about borrowing from your 401k. Whenever anyone comes to me and says, I'm going to pull the money out of my retirement account to do this adoption, I tell them to stop cold, because you do not want to take a disbursement from your 401k or your 403b. Number one, you're going to get penalized on it. And number two, you're going to pay taxes on it. The best way to utilize your 401k funds is to borrow against your own money. You're going to get the best interest rate there, and you're going to be borrowing against your own money. And then when you get your adoption tax credit or whatever the case might be, you're going to be able to pay that back. So always look at your employer first. If you have a 401k or a 403b, the 403b, by the way, is just a nonprofit version of the 401k. If you have any of those kinds of accounts, employer sponsored, just ask your employer about the people that manage that and contact them. You'll see these little QBAD in the parentheses, and that's for me to remind you to tell you about the qualified birth or adoption distribution. Now, this would be the only exception to the don't draw money down from your 401k. This happened during the Secure Cares Act. This was during during COVID. And what they allow you to do now is you can take a distribution. You can disperse from your employer funds $5,000 per child. Okay. And there's no penalty on that. So no matter how old you are, you can take $5,000 per child, and there's no penalty on it. You do have to still pay taxes on it. So just know that that is a function of that. We don't necessarily say that up front, like offer that up front, because truly, a lot of people are going to use that in the case that, like, they have to travel at the last minute, or they're short $5,000 or whatever the case might be. It's not going to be your first go-to that you're going to go to. A home equity line of credit. We all know about the home equity lines of credit. However, the tax rules have changed on this, and now you can't write off that interest unless you prove that it was for home improvements. So not so great. You also have in the home equity line of credit. Now, the good news and the bad news, home equity lines of credit are wonderful. It allows you to pay it down, use it again, pay it down, use it again. You can take it from the equity of your home. So that's, it's a very flexible line of credit. But in order to get that, you have to do an appraisal. You have to pay closing costs in many cases. So and the interest rates can be across the board. So that's something to think about. If you already have a line of credit, there's another place. If you already have it, and maybe you have some of that money left over. Lenders such as bank and credit unions, very important. Credit unions do tend to be a bit more conservative than banks, but both of them are going to look at the standard. They're going to look at your credit score. They're going to look at your DTI, or debt to income ratio. So they're going to look at a number of those things. And then when we when we kind of drill down on this, we can talk about those traditional and non-traditional lenders. I'm going to talk about those in a minute, but I want to drill down on the credit unions. So credit unions, America's Christian Credit Union is a national credit union. They offer an adoption line of credit for prospective adoptive families. I love this product. It is just like that HELOC loan that we talked about, but you don't have to do an appraisal. You don't have to have closing costs. It's just an adoption line of credit. Firefly Credit Union and ViStar Credit Union both followed suit. So they are also doing and offering an adoption line of credit to families in Minnesota and then also families in Georgia and Florida. I think ViStar is a little bit bigger. I think they have a broader reach. There might even be more states that they're in right now. Full disclosure here, folks, America's Christian Credit Union. So you're going to check a box and you do need to have or sign a statement of faith for becoming a member to America's Christian Credit Union. You understand, of course, the difference between a credit union and a traditional bank. A credit union really is, it's not really how we think about a nonprofit, but it's an organization. It's a membership organization. And so you have to become a member. So they have the right to set any kind of rules that they want to. Lightstream, which is really funded by SunTrust Bank, that's an online lender. My Egg Fund, I like this. It's kind of like a lending tree. You know, you can go on and you can fill out an application and it'll send you the various different interest rates and various different companies that you can work with. And then foundations. And we're going to talk a little bit about foundations. So this is kind of like the non-traditional lending route. Sometimes folks come to us and they'll say, oh, we just want 0% interest. Tell us all those 0% interest loans that you can get. And it's true. There are some 0% interest loans. However, you have to be careful about when those loans are due. So sometimes you can take a 0% interest loan out and, you know, it might be $10,000, but you have to make payments on that. So these organizations, Lifesong for Orphans and I think Lifesong for Orphans and Abba Fund are the only two that have 0%, no interest rate at all. Very important to know, these are religious organizations. They are foundations. They also give grants. Very important to know that they want you to sign a statement of faith even more so. They want you to be more forthcoming about your faith. So that's very important. Pathway for Little Feet is not 0% interest. I'm not sure what their interest rate is. It's relatively low, but this again is another Christian religious-based organization, and they can lend money. So that's just more of a traditional loan that you might get. And then of course we have a Child Waits. A Child Waits is a foundation. They do grants also. So the grant making organizations that are also lenders are Lifesong and A Child Waits and Abba Fund. So those are really your non-traditional foundations. And A Child Waits is not a religious organization. They do have a loan. They can do a combination of a loan and a grant to you. I believe it maxes out at $10,000. They do want a cosigner. They don't care if you have a 850 credit score, they're going to ask you for a cosigner. So that is one of the requirements that they have on their application and on their loan that they would give you. So that kind of gives you an idea about the differences between the traditional and non-traditional lenders that are out there. And so here it is. We talk about grants. And, you know, the first question that most folks will ask is, how much is it and how do I pay for it, right? How much is that adoption and how do I pay for that? The second question is, how do I qualify for grants? It's either the second or third question. They come in waves. So how do I qualify for grants? And then what's the adoption tax credit? So it kind of goes on that stream. So everyone is interested in grants, and it's very important to understand that there are a lot of grants that are out there that are available for prospective adoptive families. And in order to really kind of understand if you qualify for grants, we have kind of put this trifecta, if you will, together. Okay. So first off, is there a religious affiliation? The majority of the foundations that are out there have a religious affiliation requirement, i.e. Christian. Okay. And there are different levels that they want established. So there are some that require just a statement of faith and checking a box. There are others that require an interview by a pastor. Okay. So it just depends. Then they also want to look at financial need. So what is financial need? We've seen this number kind of move around a little bit. Right now, that number is sitting at around 150 to 170,000, maybe a little bit less, kind of tops out around 150, 160,000 for two people with no children. If you have children, that can be a consideration in financial need. They're looking at your taxes. They're going to want your taxes. They're going to want your home study. You have to have those things done before you can apply for a grant. And then, of course, special needs. Is the child that you're adopting, are you open to a special needs child? Are you open to an emergency placement, for example? If you're open to those and you have that kind of a situation, then you may qualify for more grants. So when you think about this and you think about your own personal situation and you look at this and maybe you say, I don't have a religious affiliation, but I do have a financial need. Well, you will qualify for some foundations. I don't want to portray that you won't. I'm just saying that you won't. There aren't as many to apply to. And let's talk about that for a moment. I think that the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to grants is they're just going to go and apply to all of them. And really, that's not the best approach. First of all, I would tell you that many of these are volunteer organizations. And so they have very small staffs. They get hundreds, thousands of applications in. So be mindful of that. Read the small print, read the FAQs, read the information before you apply to anything. Our team really understands who these foundations are. And so we will pick like a top 3 to 5 foundations and have our families apply to them. And as we look at the top foundations, you've got Lifesong for Orphans. They are a religious organization. They are known for what they call matching grant. So you'll get approved for a grant, say $5,000, and you have to raise $5,000, and then they're going to give you $5,000. So that's what it's called, a matching grant. Show Hope is another religious affiliated foundation. If you are familiar with Stephen Curtis Chapman, this is his and his wife's foundation. Their application is a pretty lengthy application, has quite a few religious-based questions in it. They also have started a medical grants that I think is kind of post adoption, and that's been very, very good for them. So lots of heart around Show Hope. They give a lot of grants, but a couple of some barriers that they have. Their application is very complicated. You do have to have a religious affiliation with that, and we understand that it's a pretty extensive application. Help Us Adopt. We've really seen come to life over the years. This is a New York foundation, a very dedicated group of people. They're a non-religious organization. We have seen them grow. They can give up to $15,000 in a grant. They've even given more than that to some families. So they fund both domestic and international adoptions. So does Lifesong, and so does Show Hope, by the way. A Child Waits Foundation, that is the one that I was telling you about before. They are a non-religious organization. They give grants and also loans. Gift of Adoption is another non-religious foundation. And then JSC Foundation is a religious foundation. So you can kind of see there's a mix. Just because you don't have a religious affiliation does not completely take you out of the running. I think probably the most important thing is going to be creating and making financial need, really making a reasonable case for why you want to adopt. And I cannot stress enough that the pool, you have to think about they have an amount of funds. They have a designated amount of funds that they can give to a designated group of families. And they may get, in any given round, they may get more applications than they can fund. It is a competitive process only because of the numbers. So you are being looked upon as, how does this family meet our mission, meet our goals and our philosophy compared to this family? So one of the things that's very important is just your story. And this is not your profile book. Okay. This is not that networking book. This is another book. This is another, story, another document. It's a page to a page and a half. And it is your compelling case. It's your reason for adopting, and very, very important. It's short. It's to the point. It's not too much specific information. It's more about why you're adopting. It's more about what brought you here. And then, of course, it's also articulating how you are going to pay for this. So again, story is very important. And in that story, you need to make a reasonable case. Okay, we are adopting because of this. We have this much money. We plan to get a loan. We plan to write grants. We plan to do this and that. And this is how. And they really want to know that you're going to finish this adoption, whether they give you a grant or not. Meeting the mission. I can't stress that enough. This goes back to don't apply to everyone. If you want to look at grants and you want to look at them seriously, create a list. If you're working with us, our coach is going to do that for you. Working with Rebecca, we're going to be able to come alongside and help you with this process. So, but what you're going to do is you're going to look at the website, you're going to read the mission, you're going to read the philosophy, you're going to read the FAQs, you're going to read stories or types of families that they have funded. And the question you're going to ask yourself is, do I look like a family that they would fund? Do I meet the criteria and the guidelines? And if you do not, then do not apply. Do not apply. No, they're not going to make an exception for you. No, they don't want you to send photos or videos. So stick with the rules, make a reasonable case, meet the mission of the organization. And I think you'll find that you'll have better success, more success.
Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey.
So shifting now to crowdfunding. Now, I think I shared with you at the beginning that I have a background in fundraising. I've been doing fundraising most of my life. Crowdfunding is one of the things that's really a reality of our life. I remember an article that I read, unfortunately, right after 9/11, and it talked about consumer confidence and how people were feeling because of that terrible tragedy, how people were flooding, giving money online and really giving money. And one of the things that happened was the consumer confidence around online giving really rose. And that really helped people to understand, well, okay, this is not so scary to give money. And, you probably have all heard of GoFundMe. I mean, GoFundMe is the most popular online cash giving platform that is out there. Now, there are others, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But, for the most part, GoFundMe is going to be your cash platform that you're going to allow people to give you money through. Others are going to include Adopt Together. Life Song for Orphans, as we talked about, does have a a platform called My Story. And when you're looking at various different platforms and how you're going to raise money online, a couple of questions need to come to mind. First of all, is it a nonprofit? So as an example, GoFundMe is not a nonprofit. When you get money from GoFundMe, it is money, cash that someone is giving you through that platform, and it goes directly into your account. I don't get a tax deduction from that. You don't have to claim it on your taxes unless it's over that amount. Remember, $17,000 in cash gifts without claiming it on your taxes. This is where GoFundMe comes in. It's unrestricted, so that there's no rules about how you spend that money. Again, this is where it's really cool, where people can give you money, cash gifts, and then you can take that money and you can use it toward your qualified adoption expenses, and then you can use that receipt as going toward your adoption tax credit. That's how cash gifts are different. Now, there are crowdfunding sites that are nonprofit, and receiving a grant and receiving cash without getting too far into it, it's going to have different tax consequences. And so important to kind of know what those differences are. The fees, a lot of people ask us about fees. This has kind of settled down over the years. It used to be all over the map. That's when we had a number of different cash platforms that were out there. And frankly, we've watched GoFundMe kind of gobble all those guys up. So really, it's just a small percentage and then a per transaction. You can thank the credit card companies for that. Who receives the money? That's very important. If it is a nonprofit organization, sometimes the money will go to your provider. It will not go to you directly. But if it is cash, it'll go directly to you. And then I think it's so important to understand that building it does not make them come. If you do not have a presence, if you don't have a presence on Facebook, if you don't have a social media presence, it is unrealistic to think that you can create a GoFundMe page and people are going to come to that. This does require work. This requires a campaign, if you will. It requires posting. It requires educating people. And we really work with families to help them create a campaign. It is a fundraising campaign. And you have to think about your crowdfunding platform as kind of the hub where you're going to send people to give money. But you might have a GoFundMe account, and then you might have your Facebook account, and you might talk about on your Facebook account or your Instagram account and push people to the GoFundMe to give the money. There's a lot of various different ways that you can do it, but you want to think about it as your hub, using it as your hub. So these are kind of the top sites. GoFundMe, we talked about that. ABBA Fund, that is a nonprofit. Adopt Together, that is another nonprofit. A very cool story about Hank Fortner and his family. I remember when Hank created Adopt Together. It is solely an adoption platform. There are only adoptive families on that. It is a grant, by the way. But it's very similar. It's similar to GoFundMe, and they're kind of a hybrid. So they can give you cash from the grant, they can give it to you, or they can send it to your provider, depending upon what you want them to do. And then, of course, LifeSong My Story. They use My Story. So when you get a grant from LifeSong and it's a matching grant, you are going to create a platform. You're going to create a profile on My Story. You're going to draw people, your friends and family, to that platform. They're going to give money, and then LifeSong is going to match that. That's kind of how that whole thing works. So when we break it down in terms of the crowdfunding basics, again, this social media presence, having a social media presence out there is very important. That's important to the success of your fundraising campaign. A lot of times what we see is it's not just crowdfunding. It might be a special event. I really love it when folks put together an event like a silent auction or a spaghetti dinner and a silent auction or a little mini concert or, whatever it is, a special event, and then use the social media presence, use the site to have people come and give gifts. So really using it as your hub and making it engaging and fun. What do I mean by that? I'm just going to say it's not all about money. It's just not. You've got to make this engaging and fun. You have to build a sense of urgency. You have to make it fun for people to want to learn about your process and what you're going through. Educating them, helping them to really understand what you're going through, how excited you are. You were matched with a birth mom, you're going to go travel, you're going to do all those things. Now, a word of caution here. Under no circumstances should you be publishing anyone's name, birth mom's name, anybody's name, child's name, anything like that, location, anything like that. You're always looking to your professional to make sure that they're giving you the right guidelines for that. That's very important for intercountry adoption, also very important for domestic adoption. So be very careful. I once had someone say to me, when you're using social media for your adoption, you're actually creating a footprint for your child. And that really struck me because, my daughter is 18, for example. She knows more about the internet and more about social media than I ever knew. And if she ever stumbled on something that perhaps I wrote or perhaps I posted or something, I would be terrified that she, would stumble on that and I wouldn't even know that she'd gotten access to that. So just remember that you're creating a trail, a social media trail, and be mindful of that when you're sharing information about your child and about your family. And then finally, timing is everything. So it's very, very important. You don't want to start a fundraising campaign at the very beginning of your adoption. You're going to have people that are going to be like, what's going on, right? They're not going through this like you're going through it. So you want to make sure that that your timing is right, and that people have kind of a sense of urgency, a sense of, I want to be a part of this. So you're not going to start something at the very beginning. You're going to kind of wait until you get your home study done for sure. You're going to wait until you start networking, and you're going to kind of warm the pump up from that particular perspective. Oh, and then we can take a big deep breath about the adoption tax credit. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the adoption tax credit because I can tell you that this is an entire webinar. So I'm not going to go too far into it, but I am just going to briefly talk about the basics of the adoption tax credit. It is for domestic, private, and intercountry adoption and foster to adopt. Step-parent adoption is excluded. You cannot take the expenses from step-parent adoption toward the adoption tax credit. A credit is different than a refund. It's simple, folks. It's a dollar-to-dollar reduction for your liability, your tax liability. So if you were to go right now and look at your W-2 and it showed that you paid $5,000 in taxes that year, when you apply for the adoption tax credit, you're going to get $5,000 off the top as a refund. Okay. So that's just basically how it works. You're going to file for the adoption tax credit in the year your adoption is finalized. Now, there are some exceptions for domestic adoptions when you have a failed attempt. There's a waiting period. That's for another webinar. You can carry your expenses over from previous years, so you combine them. So if you've been in the adoption process for a year and a half or 2 years, you can combine those expenses. And then the adoption tax credit is per child. It's per child. And look at these numbers. Look at that. So 2025, this is for adoptions finalized in 2025. That adoption tax credit is $17,280. Okay. If your adoption is finalized in 2024, that's people that are applying now. Those are people that are putting toward the adoption tax credit now for the 2024 taxes. It was $16,810. And again, not refundable. And then the other thing, this is where I think a lot of people leave money on the table. If you have someone that comes, if you have an accountant or a CPA or someone that comes and tells you that you do not qualify for the tax credit, please get another opinion. So many times we have people that tell us that they were told that they did not qualify. These are the adoption tax credit phase out ranges. And what does that mean? That means that if you make $259,000, you still qualify for the full adoption tax credit. If you make $259,189, you still qualify. But if you make $259,190 or $91, this is modified adjusted gross income. you will still qualify, but you'll qualify only for a portion of the tax credit. And you can see there's that range, 259,190 to 299,190. If at the end of the year, your modified adjusted gross income is 299,191, you will not qualify for the adoption tax credit. And those numbers are important because if you're in this range at all, and let's say maybe you're hovering around a modified adjusted gross, or your income, your gross income is hovering around 250, 259, you don't know what it's going to be. Right now, start thinking about those tax shelters, that 401k, when you can give contributions, all that kind of stuff, so that you can start bringing that down so that you can qualify for that adoption tax credit when the time comes. We always recommend that you get someone who knows about the adoption tax credit. If you're working with Rebecca, we hope you will, and be able to work with us. We do tax credit webinars every January and February with a tax specialist that specializes in the adoption tax credit. And she's really, really amazing. And every single time I've been doing webinars, her webinars for years, like 10 plus years. And every time I do a webinar with Becky, I learn something totally new. So it's really wonderful. So happy to have the opportunity to talk with you about this. And if anything, hopefully you understand that adoption finances are complicated. And maybe this gives you an opportunity to kind of take a breath and think about, if you're on wherever you are on your adoption path, think about, step back and think about the money, think about what you can contribute, think about how you can put all of those pieces together and how that fits into that timeline for you. And I promise you that you will be so glad that you did, and so glad that you are really paying attention to these numbers, because numbers do matter. So with that, Rebecca, I will pop back on, and thank you so much. It's always so nice to have an opportunity to talk about this. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, wow. That was thorough and that was amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to say, you had told me we have a number of families working with you right now,
Yes.
and it's unbelievable when you tell me how much collectively they have raised toward their adoption. It's amazing. There were a couple things you said throughout your presentation that I had never heard before. I always learn something new, and I'm
Oh,
like,
that's so
oh
funny,
my
because you haven't learned this before.
God, there's so much to know.
Yeah.
But I thought it was for anybody could borrow against their 401k or an IRA. And you had said that they need their employer's sign off on that. Can you?
Well, yeah, let me elaborate on that. So most of the time, probably 80% of the time, individuals can borrow against their 401k or their 403b. IRAs are a little bit different. It depends upon the type of IRA, that it is, and all of that. So you do have to inquire with your employer about if it is allowable. Most of the time it is. Sometimes there are situations where people are not, where they set rules that you cannot borrow from your fund. Okay. Sometimes those rules have to go with vesting, how long you've been employed, so they can set rules because it is their fund and they're contributing to it. What we say is you don't need their permission. You just need to inquire about, is it available?
Mm-hmm.
Is this an available option for you? And if we're looking at loans, then that's really a good place to go and get a loan if you can get it. So typically the rules are, if you can borrow from your 401k or your 403b, let's say you have $50,000 in there, you typically can borrow up half of those funds. And then as you borrow the 25,000, and if you leave your place of employment, you have to pay it back immediately. It becomes a disbursement. So you make monthly payments, and those monthly payments are taken out of your paycheck.
Okay, that's awesome to know. When do you think is the best time to apply for grants?
Well, first of all, you can't apply for grants until your home study is done. So your home study must be done. We also really encourage families to do your budget, to go through your budget and understand what your projected costs are. And I say that because sometimes we don't know, right? So, but we can give an educated guess for what some of those numbers are.
Mm-hmm.
What you're going to set aside for birth mom, travel, get a number for travel, get a number, assign numbers to that so that you have somewhat of an idea. Because at the end of that story that you're writing, or if you're filling out any kind of an application online for a foundation, they're going to ask you how you plan to pay for this adoption. And you need to be able to articulate that, and you need to make it make sense. So these people read these all the time. So it's important not to be trying to figure that out when you're doing a grant application. You want to have those numbers, and you want to have a really good way of articulating how you plan to pay for your adoption. The other core document that we recommend is your story, your adoption story, your compelling reason for why you're adopting. And the reason we do that is because you use that story in so many different venues. You might, if you're fundraising, you use that story. If you are even getting a loan, sometimes you use that story. If you're, however you're doing it, if you're doing social media and fundraising online, you're going to use that story. It's for your grants predominantly, but as you get into the foundations, let's say you have 5 or 6 foundations that you're going to apply to. Every one of those foundations is going to ask you that in a different way. And they're going to ask you for your personal statement, or they're going to ask you for your personal story. They may have character restrictions. They may not have character restrictions. So if you have that core document with you and you've already gone through this process of finding the very best right way to say it, then you're going to zip through those applications. You're not going to get bogged down in every single application trying to come up with how you're going to talk about that again.
And do you help families write that, or will you look them over and give suggestions?
Absolutely. We have an entire video that is dedicated to how you write your story. And we even have a process that we have designed for how the story can be a voice for both parties. So, sometimes when we go down these paths, sometimes one person is just going to take the lead, which is great, right? You're going to take the lead and I'm going to do these things. The story needs to be a combined voice. It needs to be an experience, and it needs to be heard in that way.
What do you mean by combined voice?
What we have families do is each person will go and answer a series of questions.
You're talking about 2 different partners,
right?
A voice from one partner and another partner.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
got it.
Writing their own story from their own perspective. And then what they're doing is they're combining that and bringing the best of each of the individual stories, so that we're not just getting one person's perspective.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I want to reiterate a couple things that that I recently heard from conversations with both Help Us Adopt and from Gift of Adoption, which are 2 of the largest grant funding organizations that will fund to anyone, regardless of religion, race, of who you are. So Becky at Help Us Adopt said, if you need $5,000, don't ask for $40,000. Because you're not going to get that. And probably if they can see they don't need $40,000, they only need $5,000, but they've asked for way too much, they might just push you aside. So truly be honest about what is that number that you need. And I think that's where that budgeting comes in. Also, I do a lot of like letters or just like letters for families. A lot of my clients will ask me, can you write a letter showing how much we've spent on everything thus far? And I can do that for families.
Yes.
And then one thing I learned from Gift of Adoption Fund is that you can apply for a grant anytime up through finalization, which I didn't know. And I don't know if all grant agencies are like that, but he stated that even after you bring the baby home, if you have not finalized yet, you can request funds.
Okay, so both are correct. Let me clarify for you
Please.
about how these foundations work. So
Yeah.
when we look at that list of foundations, some of the foundations are what we call child-centered, which is Gift of Adoption is a child-centered foundation. Help Us Adopt is more of a concentrate more on the couple or the individual who is doing the adoption. They want to know their story. They want to know, have they experienced infertility? They want to know,
Right.
they want to know more about their particular story. So the two perspectives are correct. If you get a grant from Help Us Adopt, you're likely going to get that grant earlier in your process. Okay. And when you get a grant, and she is correct, you need to make it make sense. So she's right. You're not, if you need $5,000, if you've gotten other grants, or if you have loan money or whatever, or gifts or whatever, you need to make it make sense. Because if you're asking for 40,000, thinking you're gonna get that from someone, trust me, they will figure that out. Okay.
Yeah.
And then as you apply to other grants,
you're not going to make money on grants.
you're not going to make money on this. So as you also apply to other grants, sometimes what they'll say is, have you received any grants from other foundations? And typically the statement is, we are applying to these foundations. And so they know that you're applying to other foundations. If you've received a grant from someone and you're from a foundation and you're getting ready to apply, you need to make it known, we've received a grant from this foundation, and then you've got to do your numbers to make it make sense, right? So that's very, very important. And again, Help Us Adopt is going to be a foundation that's going to give you money probably even before you get matched. That's where they're centered. That's how and they have 5, I think now, deadlines throughout the year.
Yeah.
Yes. And they adhere very strongly to those deadlines. So you miss a deadline, you're out of luck. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Gift of Adoption is actually one of the few. Okay. A Help Us Adopt will not consider your application after placement. So there are two things you have to be concerned about: placement and finalization. Okay. Many times, many of the foundations will disqualify you if the child has been placed in your home.
Yeah.
They just do. Help Us Adopt is one of them. Lifesong sometimes will do that. JSC Foundation will definitely do that. Show Hope is a little, they can look at circumstances, but most of the foundations do not want placement. Gift of Adoption, A Child Waits, is another one that is more child-centered. And so they're going to give grants on kind of the tail end of your experience. And they are very concerned about the child. They're concerned about that child's story.
Yeah. So if you adopt special needs, or if your child is in the hospital longer than you expected, and whatever, if there's any sort of extra need, they're a great place.
There are so many cases where you take custody of the child under special circumstances, and then you are adopting. And we work with many, many, many families like that. And Gift of Adoption is one of the few foundations that will give money after placement and will look at special considerations: Gift of Adoption and A Child Waits. I also want to say there's another one called Rollstone Foundation. So there's a couple of others. We have a list of probably 40 different foundations that are available that our coaches consult and when they're working with a family. But we've done some Gift of Adoption. We partnered with Gift of Adoption in a number of different extremely sensitive cases where they have given funds. But no matter what, once finalization happens, then you're done. You may not apply for grants after finalization. Some people get placement and finalization confused.
Yeah.
So placement is very different than finalizing that adoption. Some folks say, oh, well, I can wait until I get, wait until the child is home placed, and then I can start looking at grants. And no, we don't want you to do that. We want you to start talking and looking soon. Okay.
Yeah. And a
it's
great
it's that
time
fun.
is after your home study and after you've signed up with your agencies.
Right, right. And
Um,
then you kind of understand,
that
you've had
waiting.
enough of a
Right.
window to really understand. You've written your story, you kind of know what your timeline is, you kind of really understand what your expenses are. And at that point, you can start. And that's also another time to do fundraising because
Yeah.
now you've got a sense of urgency, right?
Hmm.
Now, oh, this is exciting. And now you can begin to announce it and build a campaign around that.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about social media, and I just wanted to also bring up and give a plug. I'm also the CEO of Our Chosen Child, which not
Right,
only designs adoption profiles, but we also have a full social media package that if you're not somebody who's really creative or needs help with your fundraising pages or your social media, how are you going to roll it out?
right.
Our Chosen Child is a great place to go to, where we can design that for you. We can put some reels and
Oh,
videos
great.
and
That's
all of
wonderful.
that
That's
together
wonderful.
for you.
I
So,
love that, Rebecca, because at the end of the day, it is a campaign.
yeah.
So even though we don't like to talk about it like that, it's a campaign. And it's about visuals and it's
Hmm.
about the story and it's about how you talk about it.
Yeah.
That really does make a difference. And it's
Yeah.
about making it unique to you. So many times we have people ask us, well, what are the best fundraising ideas that are out there? And I always say the best fundraising idea that is out there is an idea that is unique to you, that draws your community and your family and your friends together. That's the best fundraising.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you so much. You provided so much information. There's even more information. If you want to keep listening about money, the Adoption Roadmap podcast, Kelly Ellison, you did a podcast
Yes.
episode, and we also recently had Becky from helpusadopt.org, and we're having gift of adoption fund.
Oh,
So
great.
there's a lot of different opportunities, and there's other people on there that talk about money. So if you go to the Adoption Roadmap podcast, there's even more information, as well as a woman who talks about um, how she adopted on Facebook. So if you're
Wow.
interested more on
Great.
that, yeah.
Great.
So
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you,
Thanks for
Rebecca.
your time. I think people are going to get a whole lot out of this.
Oh, good. I hope so. And it's such a pleasure to work with you and your families. And we're so delighted to be able to help so many families with bringing their families together forever. Appreciate having the
Absolutely.
opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.